All right, so before I get started, I know Thursday probably seems like a lifetime ago. Some of you might have got taller. I think I was smaller then. So when you were in the cafeteria or the food room, whatever that's called, after or during snack time, one of you lost something of value. I saw a couple of heads perk right up. So did anybody lose something of value on Thursday night? Did you reach in your pocket and you didn't have something that you thought you did, or you could have just been walking and you might not, obviously judging by the looks on your faces, none of you remember losing anything of value. So for some people this might not be that valuable. You know, for some of us who get paychecks, we might think that what I have in my pocket here isn't very much, but for others, it's a lot. And so if you didn't lose anything valuable, then I got to give it to the person that found it, because they found some money on the ground that all of a sudden, because I mentioned money, then oh wait a minute, this person lost something. It was Josh, it was somebody else. So if somebody didn't lose something, then I'm going to give this to the young man who found it. If nobody raises their hands to say that it was theirs. All right? It's all yours, buddy. Yep, come on. So this is what honesty brings you. He came up and tapped me on my shoulder and said, hey, somebody dropped $1. And so I said, get it, and then I'm going to hold on to it for when it's my turn to speak, and I'm going to offer it up. And if nobody mentions it, dude, it's yours, and you can do with what you want with it, whether you keep it, spend it, or whatever you want to do, it's all you get. So this morning I'm going to talk on a subject that that's been burning within me for a while. And I can't stop thinking about it, because when I understood what this was, it completely revolutionized my perspective on how I view myself. And as we got started in this weekend here, like most of these, whether it's winter retreat or EMT, even though this is my first one, like here, I've been to enough youth conferences that even though the conference speakers or whoever's sharing, they don't typically get together and okay, I'm going to talk on this, and then you're going to grab my point and go here, and you're going to grab my point and go there. That could happen, but I don't see that happening here. So I see that taking place in this time here as well. Without us knowing, we're going to build on each other without trying to do that. And who knows, that's really flowing with the Spirit, like we tried to learn the other night or the other day when we did some Spirit-led outreach. So yesterday when Elisa was sharing, I thought this was pretty amazing, that she mentioned a writer yesterday. Can anybody remember that writer's name? Let's see who was paying attention. She spoke for... Look at that, look at that. Note taker, good job. So Brennan Manning wrote a book called Abba's Child. And this book heavily influenced me, even though it's a fairly new read. I was already on a topic, and then after I read this book, it completely just opened my eyes up to what it really means to have the identity of Christ in me. So what was it, Friday night what was Josh's subject that he shared on Friday night? Does anybody remember? Okay, but he hit on something really specific in that message. Can anybody remember? And the bonus point for the scripture and verses.
John 3.
All right. And what is John 3 about?
Nicodemus.
Yep. What else? Very specific. What did he talk to Nicodemus about? Being born again. Being born again, and what that really means, man. So we can get caught up in our culture of church to where we don't really think about that, and then somebody else comes into the church and we kind of can be a little passive when we use our language and we share with that person when they come in, because it's so ingrained in us, we can sometimes lose sight, and not that it's not that we're wrong or that we're bad. We can just kind of lose sight of it because we might not have used those terms in a while. And so I think it's really important that this is a foundational thing that we always need to carry with us. Because you never know when you're going to meet somebody that doesn't know this information. And so what I'm going to talk about today is, I don't know if definitely on the schedule, but I want you to write these words down. Beloved identity. Because these two words are some strong words. They don't seem very strong, but to me they matter so much. So I've been wrestling with this thought that generations after generations of believing something, and even if that belief is rooted upon enough truth, it can now become a reality. And now these accepted beliefs can lead us down a road that can be very challenging to turn around or even overcome. And even if that perceived truth is whether it's 1,500 years old or whether it's 30 years old, it can still be a really tough thing to turn around from. My mind has to shift on many things, and the greatest one is this, that my identity is beloved in Christ. My identity doesn't begin or end anywhere else or in anything else but Jesus Christ. And that might sound like we're beating the same drum, but you're going to beat the drum of Jesus for the rest of your life. Because when you become a believer in Christ, you give up some things. You almost give up your rights. You forfeit a lot of things. I forfeited a lot of things to follow Christ. I was trying to become a chef. I was a restaurant owner. I was really trying to do this life like I thought what I was supposed to be doing. But yet, when I found Christ, I had to lay that down. And I'll talk more about that maybe at a different time, because I'm not trying to go down a rabbit trail on something. But what I'm saying is you're going to beat that drum. And it might feel like sometimes, man, I've heard the same message again. I've heard the same message again of identity. And it just sounds like it's repackaged into something else. But guess what? You need to understand and really get a hold of this, because there's going to be some turrets that are coming.
Right.
Do you know what a turret is? Or a storm? Whatever word we choose to use. Storms are going to come. And we need to be prepared. We need to be anchored. Just like in that dream that I shared last night or the night before rather? Do you guys remember the dream that I shared about with the rock and the framework of that deck being on the rock that went out into the water? Storms are going to come, and we got to be ready. So, this is not going to be, you're not going to be able to write this down. You can ask me later, but Thomas Merton says this: you cannot tell me who I am, and I cannot tell you who you are. If you do not know your own identity, who is going to identify you? Others can give you a name or a number, but they can never tell you who you really are. That is something you can only discover from within yourself. John 17:23 says this: I in them, and you in me. Jesus is praying to the Father right before he goes to the cross. And if you put yourselves in that moment, can you put yourself just in a moment of what Jesus is about to go through? He knows he's about to be killed. He knows that his body's about to suffer. And yet he's praying to God saying, I want this work to be completed of I in them and you in me. So what Thomas Merton says here that you can only discover from within yourself, you can only truly discover when Christ is here. And from that is where your beloved identity really begins. So the Passion Translation says it this way, and this is really phenomenal. John 17:23. I'm going to back up a little bit because I think that is really important. Verse 20, he says this: and I ask not only for these disciples, but for those who will one day believe in me through their message. So when Jesus is speaking in John here, he's not only speaking for the disciples. This is for us. Sometimes he's speaking directly to the disciples in other chapters, but this one is a word for all generations, from then until the end of time. He goes on to say, I pray for them all to be joined together as one, even as you and I, Father, are joined together as one. I pray for them to become one like us, so that the world will recognize that you sent me. For the very glory you have given me, I have given them, and so that they will be joined together as one and experience the same unity that we enjoy. God literally enjoys the unity of the whole Trinity. And then he finishes in verse 23, you live fully in me, and now I live fully in them. Those words changed my life. And even though when I heard those, I've already been a Christian for 10 years, hearing those words resonated so deeply within me that I couldn't stop talking about it. The Lord has just continued to work these deep work within me that I just can't get over. And I'm reflecting back on the things that I've learned along my way that I've picked up. All of you have learned something from your parents, your siblings, your friends, your teachers, ministry workers, anything. You've picked up, knowingly and unknowingly, perspectives along your way, right? One day you didn't know how to use a knife, did you? And somebody showed you how to cut something on your plate. You know, your mom and dad used to cut your hot dogs for you. And even probably dip them in ketchup or ranch dressing, which is disgusting. And then they taught you one day to use the knife. Now you know how to use a knife. Now, his family might hold the knife this way. Your family may hold the knife differently. But you still learned how you were taught, right? So I was reflecting on this and how sometimes we come to a place in life where we become cognitively aware of new information. Have you ever done something for so long and then you come up to you learn something new and then you have to change the way that you've done something? Does anybody have that moment where you've done something for so long and then you're like, wait a minute, there's a better way to do that? So in Acts chapter 18, we read an awesome story, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but it's Acts chapter 18, and Priscilla and Aquila are an amazing married couple that are listening to a brother in the Lord speak whose name is Apollos. And after he's done speaking, they pulled him aside and explained the way more completely, and it changed the way that he shared the gospel. So he wasn't doing anything wrong, he just got some new information and became more complete. And so as I've reflected on my upbringing, my childhood, as I've matured growing up, some people would say that I've taken longer to mature than others, because I do spend a lot of time with teenagers. Where was I? As I've taken a long time to maybe mature, I've had to reflect back on these moments in life to where, when have I come to this place where I've had to replace some information? And when I heard the term beloved identity, it just sat so deep within me. Because I don't think that I was walking as a Christian with that. Even for the time that I was, I still felt myself like succumb to these insecurities that have unknowingly I've picked up along the way. Does anybody deal with insecurities in here? Yeah, we got a room full of them. And it's okay. We're humans. We have them. We shouldn't ever shy away from them. We don't seek them out to embrace them, or like seek them out to go after them. But when they show up, we need to embrace it that it's there and seek the Lord on the why it's there and what's going on. Am I walking in a few things that we're going to discuss here in a second, that I'm going to dissect it down a little bit more into 3 different categories of what identities are. But it takes time to reflect back and see these things. So I grew up with 2 dads and 1 mom. It was not some progressive family. It was my upbringing. I had come from a divorced family where I spent most of the time with my mom and my stepdad, and then I went to every other weekend with my dad. And as every other weekend I'm spending with my dad, it was kind of fun, man. We'd go to the arcade, he'd take us to work with him, we'd get to eat whatever we wanted, we'd also get upset stomachs because my mom never let us drink Coca-Cola with breakfast, but Dad was cool with it. And so I would experience stomach pain regularly as a child because I was not expecting that. But one thing that happened when I was spending time with my dad was we'd go to the arcade, we'd have fun, man. It was really cool. We'd get to spend as much money as we wanted on quarters, and then we'd get a bunch of tickets, and then we'd win prizes, and then we'd have to put the prizes in the trunk of his car. And we'd have to hide them from my stepmom because she can't know that we were at the arcade. She can't know that he has money that she doesn't know about. So what happened in that moment was I developed this thing of, how do I hide something? I didn't seek out to lie or to try to hide things from my parents. I learned it from watching my dad do it. And I only spent Friday evening from 7 p.m. until less than 48 hours with him every 2 weeks. But yet I developed a habit that I'm going to call an insecurity because I used it later to be able to hide my true self from my friends, because I never thought that I really fit into any group. And so this really shaped me. This shaped my perspective of relationships. This shaped my perspective of my parents. This shaped my perspective of leaders. I got one dad, and I've shared a few times on my upbringing with my stepfather, and it was really rough, and it was not good. I wouldn't wish that on anybody, but our relationship is better now. And then on the other side, I had my biological father who literally taught me how to lie and how to hide. And so I have these really rough development coming up, and I didn't understand how a father really was supposed to pour into their child. And everybody wave your hands. Everybody wave, there we go, get it back. I developed this deep insecurity that I wasn't good enough, that nobody wanted me to be with them. And it was really hard, all right? I just turned 40, and I'm just now getting to a place where I can really dive into these emotions even more because I'm allowing myself to walk with a different identity than I did as a child. And so our Christian walk, our journey, whatever metaphor you want to use, conversations with others, believers, leaders, pastors, all these things have shaped our thoughts with God. Even me right now is shaping your thought, your perspective with God. And sometimes it's good, and I pray that I'm doing the right, but sometimes it might not be so good. And we have to learn, and you will over time, to what meets a standard as you grow up. When you're younger, your standards are a little lower. And it's not that it's bad, but you're willing to just go get grass stains on your clothes, because you might not have to buy the clothes or even clean them. But as you get older, or I should say maybe you're more willing to do extreme sports or do something that might cause you bodily harm. But as you get older and you realize you might have a hospital bill to pay, you might not go do that thing you wanted to do. So I'm going to be a little more cautious. But as we grow up, we develop these what I call foundational mindsets that we begin to view situations, we begin to view our physical and our spiritual walk. We're taught what to say, we're taught how to act, and sometimes we're taught that in the confines of religion or in the confines, I'm going to call it, we're taught in like a cage or we're taught in like a field. So sometimes religion can feel like a cage. How many of you guys have a dog at home? Do any of you crate train your dog? They actually like it. They really do. It feels like their room. What if I were to go home and do that to you? Would you feel like that would be good for you? No, it wouldn't. Because the dog enjoys being inside that confined area. Because it's not going to rationally think a lot when it's in there. If you were to be locked in your room for 3 months, if I were to tell you, you can't leave your room unless you need to go to the bathroom, unless you're going to go to school, unless you need to get something to eat. That's the only time you can leave your room. How do you think you would be after that 3 months? You can't have a phone. Let me just set that right now. You can't have a phone. How do you think you would be after that 3 months? Do you think you'd be dead? Spiritually, physically? Physically dead? You'd make it through. I don't know if you'd literally die. That's slightly dramatic. However, no, don't do that. All right? Okay, don't do that. No, please don't do that. So the point in that is that sometimes in those moments, even though it's a rough time and that's really bad, but you can, in that moment, choose one thing. You can choose to accept it, or you can choose to, when you come out of it, how is that going to help me grow? And I'm not going to stay there. So religion can sometimes feel like a cage, but it should more be like a field. A cage can teach you what to think inside of this box, and a field is willing for you to discover what's out there, knowing a standard that has already been set. A field feels so free. One time, we got a flat tire on the side of the road, and I go to change the tire, and it was on a bit of an the road was on a bit of an incline, and I had put the car on half on the ground and half on the asphalt. And I mistakenly put the jack on the dirt, and the dirt was soft. So as I was jacking up the car fell down while my arm was in the wheel well and trapped my arm between the flat tire and the fender. And I was really needing help. But my wife saw the field 5 minutes earlier and thought, there's probably something cool over there. And so she runs and leaves me to change the tire, which I can do it just fine. But now I'm stuck with my arm under the car while my wife is running in the field. And I'm often reminded of that when I was thinking about this. Not that I was in a cage, but how free can you be that when there's something that needs to be accomplished, that you can just be like, that looks amazing, and you just go. Not worried about what's in front of you that needs to happen there, but rather just run. And so, as I was saying, our Christian walk, our journey, is this metaphor that we use that either can bring us to a place that's a cage, or it can bring us to a place that's a field. The cage teaches us what to think. The field teaches us how to think. Our point as leaders, your parents even, friends of yours too, they should be helping you learn how to think, not what to think. Yeah, we're going to teach you some truths. We're going to teach you the standard is Jesus. The lens is always Jesus. I don't care what Bible study you choose to do, your lens is Jesus. It's not going to, it starts with Genesis and goes to the revelation of Jesus. However, the lens is always Jesus when you're looking through the Bible. Does that make sense? Because sometimes you can get stuck, and I've had many conversations with young men and women that try to use, well, the Old Testament says this, therefore it nullifies what it says in the New Testament. I said, your lens is wrong. Your lens is judging it not by the finished work of the cross. You are using the wrong lens to look at something. Stephanie's been taking pictures the entire time. How many times have you seen her change lenses when she's in here? A lot. Good, you've been paying attention to worship and not her changing lenses. These things, though, this cage of religion can sometimes corrupt, actually almost always corrupt our identity. Birth through insecurities can lead us down a path of self-righteous idolatry, whether knowingly or unknowingly. If my self-righteousness doesn't allow me to let others ask questions, then I'm going to develop in you the same insecurities. Because you're not free to be who you are. I have to be humble that you're growing up and hearing you come up and share these. Who are those two young men? I'm sorry. What is your name over there? Ethan and Zach, right? You guys sharing how you had visions right there and you didn't know what the other had. Dude, that warms my heart so much. And that right now, you guys are hearing the voice of God in a way that I've not seen in a generation of believers, that I am so looking forward to what happens in the next 5 years. Seeing where you guys are in your 20s is going to be phenomenal. You want to talk about blessing somebody? Ron's in the back there, and I'm sure he is going to be super pumped, man, to see what happens in a few years when you guys hit your 20s and some of this stuff really starts boiling to the surface, and you're like, and you just got it, and then you can turn around and do the same thing for those ones that are right behind you. So my self-righteousness, if I allow my own self-righteousness to dictate how I lead and how I let you grow, that's going to develop in you the same insecurities. And I won't allow the truth of Christ to set in you like I have in my own self. I want to ask you this. Where's your identity? Is it in beloved? Write that down. Where is my identity? Is it in beloved? Is it in self or adopted? What do I mean by that? Beloved is true. Beloved is beloved identity is the essence of John 17:23, and the realization and the reality of what John says here, the very words of Christ, of I in them. The false two are going to be self-realized identity, where you are at the center. Where your thoughts, your opinions, your own humanistic perspective that is based off of your own short-sightedness is your identity. And then the last one is adopted identity, which is the false identity based in what others think of you and how others perceive you, and you allow that to determine who you are. That's where I lived for a while, in this adopted identity of what others think. I had a lot of different friends group growing up that were, some were played sports, some were, in the, some, I don't want to say what that one was, but we did a lot of bad stuff. And then the other one would be family. And each one of these I was trying to fit in rather than just being me. I didn't feel like I could be myself around these people, and it created, like I've said, all of this insecurities. And so, where is my identity? Beloved, self, or adopted? Beloved being the awareness of Christ in me, while the other two are concentrated on self. This burden I walked with for many years until 10 years ago, when I surrendered my life to Christ, these insecurities started to get lifted off of me. But it wasn't until recently that it really just came off of me all the way. And so I get to this point, you can write this down too. It says, your vocabulary matters. The words we choose are extremely important. My parents did their best raising me. I had a lot of rough things growing up, but they did what they thought was right. Regardless of how flawed it was, they did their best. I don't hold it against them now. I did as a child because I was dealing with it very poorly. But our vocabulary matters. How I choose to speak to you right now is extremely important, because I want you to receive it in the right way, because this is building a framework for what's to come. How we say things, the depth of our language, our word choice, even our situations are extremely important. Take, for example, how Tyler responded to that Facebook post of his friend from yesterday. Do you guys remember his response? That was incredible. Tyler responded eloquently to a post that I would have just been like, nope, not engaging that, because I don't want to hear it. I don't want to see the argument of somebody dissing on a Christian because I call it low-hanging fruit. They just look for something really cheap and easy and just try to punch somebody. And so I'm like, I don't even want to engage it because I'm just going to get angry and I don't even want to mess with it. It's taken me a long time to get to a place where I can say that I don't understand. And I don't want to come across as sounding naive. I want you to really get this. As Josh mentioned on Friday about John chapter 3 and being born again, this fits right together. John chapter 3, the most prominent thing in this is about being born again. Because as Christians, that's where it starts. It starts with Christ and the realization of His finished work on the cross and everything. But then it goes into what it means to be born again, that you are not who you once were. But you have been transferred from the kingdom of darkness to the kingdom of His beloved Son. That's in Ephesians. Or Philippians. I'm really bad. It's in the Bible, dude. I'm really bad at remembering where scriptures are. So you guys can pray for me about that. That'd be cool. How much time do I have? Okay, perfect. So, I want to get into two examples as I'm landing this plane. So these two men are going to be forever linked in the Bible, and they're David and Saul. They're very familiar passages of Scripture. I'm sure there's plenty of episodes of Veggie Tales that goes through as Saul as probably an eggplant because eggplants are gross. And David is probably like a peach or something, or an apple, something that's really awesome. So we got these two very different characters. But they use fruit in the tomatoes are fruit? Exactly. I never watched Veggie Tales, I just tease our kids about them. It's pretty fun. So David and Saul are forever linked in the Bible because Saul came first because he was the first king of Israel. Then David was anointed king after him. But we link these two together because it's a perfect example of where David lived from his life and where Saul lived from his life. David didn't have the finished work of the cross for him to rely on Yahweh. Yet it was embedded in him as a child when he was out doing work for his father as tending to the sheep and worshiping, that when a bear came up or a lion came up, he manhandled it and killed them. Would any of you fight a bear in here? I mean, I thought someone would raise their hand just like, yeah, I'll fight a bear. I mean, I'm not telling you to fight a bear, but the example of that is that he's willing to lay it all down for what he was there for. His identity was not based in himself, like when the bear comes, he's like, nope, I'm out of here. I'm going to run. Saul's identity, however, was completely based in himself. That when he was faced with issues and faced with problems, he immediately blamed something else. He didn't take ownership for himself. When David did a terrible thing by getting a man killed so he can be with his wife, he owned up to what he did. And he took the punishment that God said he had to choose from three things. He took his punishment. Because he didn't walk, even though he did a terrible thing, he owned up to it. So his identity was not based in himself, it was based in God's law. Jesus is the fulfillment of that law, so we're again using the lens of Christ. We're not using the lens of something other than Jesus. But we want to look at, I want you to see this imagery of these two very different characters. And I have this romantic thought that I wanted to, I believed in Saul. When I first read the story, and I didn't know how it went, I was like cheering him on. Like I wanted him to succeed. But then when he didn't, I was like, man, I feel really bad for this guy. Like he tried really hard, but yet he failed so miserably. And he wasn't willing to own up to when he made a mistake. He was living in self-righteous idolatry. He was living in a self-identity, not as David, I believe David did. It is a beloved identity. And so, I want you to think about this. Within beloved identity is perfect alignment. As Jesus finishes in John 17:23, he says, "You live fully in me, and now I live fully in them, so that they may experience perfect unity, that the world may know that you sent me." Within the Father, within the Son, and within the Holy Spirit is perfect alignment. And you have Christ in you. So therefore, you have the perfect alignment of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit within you. And when we can walk this out for the rest of our lives, we will know, even when a storm comes, even when a torrent comes against us, it's not that you're bad. It's not that you're wrong. Even if you put yourself in a stupid situation, you can still turn your eyes to God. There's still forgiveness. Even if you go to college and something stupid takes place, don't stop going after God. And don't allow any leader to tell you that you can't come back. Don't ever tell a leader that you're unclean, and if they don't want to be around you, you call him, you call her, you call Josh, you call any one of the leaders in here, call your parents. Because none of them are going to turn you away. God never turned his back on you, and he never will.
Right.
God never turned his back on me when I think he should have. However, he was always there, trying to reveal to me what this beloved identity of him in me was. So as you go from this place, as you go out into whatever school looks like after this, whether it's online or in person, and if you're a senior and you're trying to get into college, whatever college looks like, have that thought. Remember, I have the beloved identity of Christ in me.